Hey everybody, we're gonna get started in just a second. Just waiting for Zach and for everybody, give everybody a chance to join. Hey Zach. Let's see.
Hi. I just wanted to pop in and say hi. I'm gonna go and be like anonymous helper panelist.
Perfect.
How you doing, Zach?
Good, how are you?
Good. All right. I'm here if you need me.
Cool. Thanks. All right. Let's see. I guess we'll just wait a couple of minutes for people to trickle on in. I can see people are coming in. Let's see.
Just out of curiosity, as people were popping in, you should share your location. Where are you joining us from today? I'm kind of curious where everybody's coming from.
Absolutely, pop that in the chat. I personally am in Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Perfect. Hi, Natalie from Omaha and Ryan from Dayton. Carolyn and Brian are both in Los Angeles, Denver, Miami. Man, we got people from all over.
Yeah. Buffalo, Raleigh.
Mm-hmm. Canada. Awesome.
Bangalore, awesome.
Bangalore. Nice.
Norway, Bergen, Norway.
Bergen, Norway. What time is it in Norway?
Yeah. Maya, what time is it in Norway right now? 6 p.m. Well, appreciate you taking the time to spend your early evening with us. Actually, my friend just went to Bergen, Norway.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not.
I don't know how many people you think go to Bergen, Norway with regularity. All right, I think we're up to 41 people right now, 42. So I think we're probably cool to get started. All right, you ready, Zach?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's see. Oops. All right, so this is the webinar. It's 8 tips to help you build a quicker, easier research practice. So let's see. Oops. Welcome. Welcome to everyone. Yay. We're so happy y'all are here from all over the world.
We got folks from all over the world right now. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
That is pretty wild.
Again, welcome. We can just start. I see a couple more people sort of trickling in. That's totally fine. Just doing introductions. So I'm Zach Naylor. I'm actually co-founder and CEO at Aurelius. We are a user research and insights platform. So we help you tag, organize, search, and share all of your user research data. And I've been doing UX, product strategy, and research work for over 10 years now, in just about every industry and company size there is. So I'm pretty excited to be talking with all of you about this stuff and partnering up with Carrie in User Interviews. So I'll let her introduce herself.
All right, so I'm Carrie. I'm a content creator at User Interviews. I've been in the user research game a little bit less time than Zach, but I've really enjoyed getting to know user researchers and learning all about them. User Interviews is a qualitative UXR platform, and our goal is to help teams discover and embrace user insights, and we do that by providing participant recruitment and panel management solutions. So basically, if you want some participants for your study, we've probably got them as long as they're in the US and Canada. And we help you recruit those participants and then get them into your studies, get them scheduled, and we also handle distributing incentives. If you'd like to ask me any questions about user interviews, you can email me. We'll send these slides around later, so don't worry about taking notes. We'll send all this out. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to start with our 8 tips, Zach and I's 8 tips to build a quicker, easier user research practice. And don't worry about taking notes. Again, we'll send you the slides afterwards, as well as a pretty detailed blog post that'll outline what we talk about and include all of the links that we'll mention and everything that you need to know to put this into practice. After that, we'll do a Q&A. You can drop your questions into the chat. You can put them into the Q&A section, and Erin, who's our VP of Growth and Marketing, will compile them all, and then Zach and I will answer them at the end. And then if you'd like to stay afterwards, we'll do live demos of user interviews and Aurelius to show you how you can use these tips within our platforms to make your research even easier. So first things first, it's never going to be totally easy. Unfortunately, Zach and I are not research fairies. We don't have a magic wand that just makes your research work perfectly every time. But some of these tips can help you make it easier and quicker and try to take some of the pain out of research. So first tip. Our first tip is to make research habitual. So when you're building a habit, the most important thing to do is to do it with frequency. So whether you're trying to eat a salad for lunch or trying to build a research practice that happens all the time, trying to focus on a frequency is really important. So recently, we talked to Teresa Torres, who's the founder of Product Talk, on our podcast. And she recommended doing research about once a week if you're trying to establish, customer centricity. So frequency means, once a week it could be a 5-minute conversation with a user, it could be a 20-minute usability test, an hour-long interview, whatever works, just as long as you're doing it once a week. But you also have to be realistic about your time and your resources when you're deciding on the cadence that works best for you and your team. So you may not have that time in your schedule. You have to think about the money you need for the software, the participant incentives, as well as you and your team's time, which includes preparation, the actual time it takes to do the research session, and then compiling all of the data afterwards, which we actually have some tips to help make those parts go a little quicker. So hopefully it becomes not as big of a time suck as it could be. And then the most important thing is to just stick to it. Create a recurring calendar event so that it's baked into your week like anything else you have to do. So if 4:30 on Tuesday is your research time, block it off in your calendar, say this is research time, and then every time you want to talk to a user, whether it's once a week or whether you're working on a project, you already have some time baked into your week for research before you even start.
All right, so the next tip, number 2, is to organize all of this research and your projects consistently. So Carrie was talking about, the tip number 1, establishing a habit. If you're going to make a habit of this, you're going to be doing more research, you're going to be collecting more data. It's a great idea to start with an organization scheme to keep everything in order so that not only you keep yourself sane, you stick to your habit, but then also that you can come back and actually find and reuse this stuff later, which is one of the biggest pain points that we hear. So one of the things that we typically recommend and that we see a lot of success with, and people who certainly work with us and that I've done in the past, is organizing your research projects by one of 2 ways, either by the project itself or by product. So what this does is going to give you that consistent structure for organizing them where you can find them by that common naming convention later. Find past studies faster and easier, so that when the research is done, you know exactly where to look and how it's going to be named, right? The other thing to that whether or not you choose to organize, your research studies by actual project, so user interviews for a new feature adoption, or by product, mobile app, sign-in, article sharing, whatever it might be. Organizing your notes and your observations within the project is just as important. So a lot of times, what we see, particularly in newer research teams or folks that don't have a ton of time, is they've got this wall of text, right? So everything is just kind of in there, and it's harder to sort through later. And again, another big pain point, because a lot of times 6 months from now, 12 months from now, you're going to get asked, hey, what do we know about fill in the blank? And it's a lot harder to come back and just read through this wall of text. In fact, I once heard one of our customers say, it's often faster and easier for me to do new research than it is to go back and read past research. Now, this was before they were using Aurelius, thankfully, but then, I think that just speaks volumes, because it takes a lot of time to go through this stuff. So starting with a good organization pattern at the beginning is going to allow you to find and reuse this stuff later. Organize your notes by the source or participant. So again, whether or not it's project or product, have an organization scheme for then how you're collecting your notes. So we call those categories. And then group those notes based on an organization scheme that makes sense. If it's by project, then by person or participant. If it's by product, then maybe a sub-feature or theme underneath.
Right. All right. Awesome. So the third tip is to try to assemble a panel of participants. So this is a good list of participants that you can use for research, so that you're not spending time on recruiting every single time. Recruiting can be a huge time suck, and it's also difficult to do every time. So a panel allows you to keep track of people who are great for feedback for your organization, and it also allows you to collect data on them so that you have a data-rich panel of participants to draw from every time you decide to do new research. Panels also allow you to keep track of the last time they participated, or any other things that might be important when you're thinking about inviting them to a new study. You don't want the same person participating in every single study you do, and you also don't want to be asking your participants every couple of weeks, hey, come do research with us yet again. So how do you assemble a panel of participants? There's a bunch of different ways you can go about this. User Interviews makes it really easy to manage your panels, but as far as building it, a lot of people can use existing customer lists, though some organizations don't allow you to have access to existing customer lists for research. So you can use your existing customer list. You can ask whoever it is on your team that has control of that, and then use that. But you can also use some other ways to make it, to enrich it as you go along. So you can ask people on your social media channels if they would like to participate in research. People who are following you on social media are probably pretty engaged with your business. And then you can also use in-app intercepts like app queues or Usabilla, and ask people once they're already in your app doing something or leaving feedback if they would like to participate in further feedback with you. You can also use in-context links in your blog posts or in your content to say, hey, if you'd like to participate in research with us, please, sign up here. You can use chat intercepts that talk about, that draw from what your support is already doing, and people who are already giving feedback, who are already in that mode. And you can also build feedback opt-in forms with Google Forms and then distribute them over all of these different ways. And you can manage your panel through User Interviews. And I'll walk you through how to do that at the end.
Okay, so tip number 4 is to tag and organize your notes as you go. This is a tip because a lot of people doing research already know that they should probably be doing this stuff. This is often a common thing that you're going to do in analysis, but the tip here is really to do it as you're conducting the research. The reason we recommend this is because it's going to speed up your analysis time a lot faster later. And one of the biggest challenges we hear from research teams is that they don't have enough time to spend in analysis. So what we're trying to do here is compress the amount of time you need to do analysis by actually tagging and sometimes what is called to data coding as you're doing the research itself. What this is going to do is it's going to allow you to create topics, groups, or themes as you're taking notes and as you're collecting your observations. So you can very quickly dive into analysis and take a look at those themes and start asking your questions about why you saw those themes and what this really means, rather than just surface level observations. The next step to that, of course, is keeping detailed notes about the participants or the topics that you're discussing. So, and again, if you're using something like user interviews as well, you can actually keep track of the last time they participated, and you can be collecting any new information that you're learning about them if this is focused on repeat customers, existing customers in your business. And, you know, the real point here is, as you're tagging and coding your data and you're taking notes in the research, think about tags used to describe your notes. Again, give it more detail. Think about how you would use tags on Twitter. Maybe not the best example, but oftentimes it's describing the tweet itself, right? As to where somebody can then click on that and consider that topic and find more information about it. This is going to allow you to, again, dive into a topic that you think might be important or you want to spend some more time on later, and very quickly organize all that information in one spot. And a good analogy to this is if you think about doing the Post-it note exercise on the wall, an affinity map or diagram, you're basically starting to create those themes or groups of Post-its as you're doing the research, so that you can dive right into it and speed that up much faster and easier later. By the way, we'll take a look at how you can actually do that in Aurelius too at the end. And this is just an example of that, by the way. So you can see right here, if you're actually tagging and coding your data as you're collecting it, no matter what the tool you use, this happens to be in Aurelius, but you can very quickly click on this, which we've done here, and take a look at everything we collected about taking notes as a tag. So we can very quickly see all those notes, just as we would group them on a wall with Post-it notes or something like that, and start to do our analysis later. This also helps when you have distributed teams, kind of like we have here. We asked where everybody was coming from in the beginning of the webinar, and folks are all over the world. This becomes a lot harder to do if you're not physically co-located. So particularly if you're doing this digitally, having these tags and code groups that everybody can kind of review and slice and dice on their own really helps scale your research operations too.
Perfect. And then our next tip is that you should try to involve the whole team. So whether you're distributed, whether you're co-located, whatever you have going on, research is really, really important. Hopefully if you're here, you feel the same way. But it's a great opportunity for teams of all kinds to hear from customers firsthand. And it's a good way to develop that customer centricity if that's what you're going for as a business. And consistently hearing from customers firsthand is like a really, really good way to keep them top of mind every time you're building something, every time you're doing something. What would a customer think about this? So your team can help by helping you set learning goals that have more impact. So nobody knows what's going to have impact better than the teams that are evaluated based on those goals. So that can be the goals for your overall business, the goals for that team specifically, but aligning your research with those goals will help it to have more impact overall, help it to be more important to the business, and just make a bigger difference once it's all said and done. And so your team can also help in smaller ways or in the actual research process. They can help by taking notes. They can also help by helping you to synthesize data. So having a team member hop on to take notes is just a really easy way to get them there, hearing from the customer. And to help keep things organized, you can create shareable templates, which are a good way to share what's expected of the team member when they're taking notes, and to also have everybody on the same page when you're synthesizing the data at the end, so that when you're tagging it, when you're putting it into Aurelius or whatever system you're using, it's easy to know what came from where and what goes where. And so which also makes it easier for them to help you synthesize the data if there's a system and there's tags and there's a specific way that it goes. So especially if you're a team of one, getting your team on board with this is really, really helpful in terms of how long that takes on the back end.
Tip number 6 is to document everything you can. And you're going to start to notice a pattern here with the tips that we're providing. Making your research practice faster and easier is really a lot like taking a vitamin as opposed to a painkiller. If you're solving problems that you have today in organizations and sort of one-off, you're not actually building a nice, healthy research practice like you would if you're taking vitamins every single day, right? So practicing these things often is really important to build that healthy practice long-term and avoid you a lot of headache and having to take painkillers later on. But for tip number 6, in documenting everything you can, the real point here is that you never know when certain observations, particular notes, single things that you collect in a research study might actually be useful, whether it's today, tomorrow, or like we said, 6, 12 months from now. So taking diligent notes about everything is actually really important in your research studies. And as you're doing that, of course, we already talked about tagging and coding those so that we're giving it more context. We're actually describing what they are so that when we do come back to these specific notes where we haven't looked at them maybe for 4 or 5, 6 months, we can actually get a better sense of what that meant, even that specific note in detail. It now has context and a little bit more meaning where we can put it to use again. You can then be including everything that you gather, additional artifacts like pictures, audio, video, actual transcripts, screenshots, anything else that helps provide rich context to what those notes and data mean. So again, you can sort of reassemble this stuff kind of like a Lego kit and say, well, these things are still matter. Maybe they didn't answer the question of our study at that time, but they do help us provide an answer now, whether we need to do more research or whether or not we have the answer now. And then the key to all of this, if you're documenting all this stuff, it goes all the way back to tip number 1. Keeping it organized and keeping it in one central location is absolutely critical. Another huge pain point that we hear from everybody is research is everywhere. It's in somebody's head. It's in emails. It's in spreadsheets. It's in Google Docs. It's in Confluence. It's in, I hesitate to even say SharePoint. And I'm sorry for anybody whose it is. But if you organize everything by project or product, and then the projects themselves organized in one central spot, this becomes a lot easier for you to come back and simply ask that question, what do we know about X, Y, and Z? And very quickly reuse that. And so you're not have to do new research every single time. Tip number 7 then is, as you're doing research, and a lot of you already know this, but it's worth talking about because we do actually get a lot of questions about it. It's to create key insights for sharing nuggets or findings rather than raw data. So a lot of us in user research already know we shouldn't be answering a question with single data points or raw observations because that can actually be misleading. It may actually be false. And it certainly doesn't provide the whole context, right? So creating key insights, they're sometimes referred to as nuggets, especially more recently popularized by Tomer Sharon and some of his work, but essentially the findings from the research, right? These are going to be the things that you share when somebody says, what did you learn from the research? We call those key insights. And for me, as I've always talked about it, in particular to Aurelius, there's 4 parts to this key insight. So the first part is that title. So it's the statement of what you learned, right? Next to that is then a description. It's just giving more details about that statement and why it's important, your interpretation of what you saw and learned in the research, which leads you then to the third part of a key insight, which is just as important, those notes, observations, and artifacts that actually support or provide more context to that statement. That's where those things are really, really important, right? Making a provocative statement or some statement of learning, but then actually having the raw data and notes, observations to back it up, make that really strong, particularly for people who don't understand UX research. And then finally, the fourth part are tags. Again, using tags here, but perhaps in a slightly different way, because now we're saying we're going to tag these key insights. So we've got those nuggets or findings all in one central location by theme, topic, product, persona, whatever makes sense for you. You can tag key insights in that way so you can group them together and actually, again, reuse them. So you don't even need to sort through or reread through raw data later. This is just an example of a key insight, breaking down those 4 parts for anybody interested. Now, again, this is taken from Aurelius because I'm super biased and that's what I use. But the insight here might be many research teams are using reports to share what they learned. That's our title, right? Now, the description would just be something like PowerPoint and Confluence are popular choices. You could add more detail to that. This is just an example. The tag might be creating reports. So imagine that we've got a product in our company that is creating and sharing reports. We can tag that. We can find all the key insights that relate to that very quickly. And then we've got the supporting data, those actual notes that we had during the research sessions from all of our participants that sort of back up this bottom-up analysis approach to say these 3 notes led us to this finding. That many research teams are using reports to share what they learned. Tip number 8. I am backloaded on the last half of the webinar, so you have to listen to me with the rest of the tips. But tip number 8 is grouping relevant key insights across multiple projects and then getting them shared. Again, seems like such an obvious thing for a lot of us who've been doing research for a long time, but we hear so many people struggling with it. So it's always worth repeating. But the thing here, and just some tips in grouping your key insights, some ideas, right? You can group them by topic or theme, and that's across products. That's across features, because sometimes we work in Agile or Scrum teams that are actually working on complementary things, but we have insights that relate to both. So you can then group them by product or actually by feature. Sometimes we see people grouping those findings by department or team. And so finally, you can also then group them by a customer segment or persona. These are all just simply ideas, and by the way, none of them is better than the other. These are all entirely dependent on how you're doing research and how your company operates. Another tip here is that you can use multiple organization patterns, especially if you've been documenting your research and tagging it and organizing it in the way we suggest. Again, just like that Lego kit, you can just start to reconstruct these things and say, well, these group of insights are actually about this persona. But 3 out of the 4 insights there actually relate to this product, as well as 2 new other ones, right? So you can just start to reconstruct these stories or collections of key insights that make sense for you to share with the appropriate people. And that's the final part of this tip, is to get it in their hands. There's multiple ways of doing that. We'll talk about how you do that a little bit in Aurelius for sure. But at the end of the day, get people the information that they need to help them make more informed decisions where they are. So if that's email, if that's Slack chats, whatever the case may be, have this stuff organized. It makes it a lot easier for you to share it wherever it makes sense for them to start taking action from it. And that's the 8 tips we got for you today.
Woohoo! We did it. 8 tips. All right. So we've gotten a bunch of really good questions. We've gotten some through email, and we've gotten some from the webinar, from both the chat and the Q&A little section. And Aaron's compiling them and putting them in a little Google Doc for us to answer. So I'm going to answer the first question, I guess, since Zach was totally backloaded on the tips there. So the first question is from Kyle. He emailed in right before the webinar began. And his question is, how should I advocate time for research when I'm at the beginning of a new product? And how should he perform research throughout product development sprint cycles, amongst other day-to-day responsibilities? So I guess in terms of how to advocate time for your research, or how to allocate time at the beginning of your research project, try to sit down and think about how much time it will take you to do all of the sessions, as well as meet with your team, establish learning goals, and then block off a little bit of time at the end to synthesize your data together if you have a team that you're working with. And then I think I covered the second part of that question in the first tip, which is how to perform research in a product development sprint cycle, amongst other day-to-day responsibilities. I think just taking that time and blocking it off week to week. Our product team actually does this. I think they have a block of a couple of hours every Wednesday where they actually sit down and talk to users, and they have that blocked off in their schedule every single week for them to talk to users and do some research. So Kyle, if you're here, let me know if that answers your question.
Yeah, we've got a bunch here. I don't know even where to start. So I noticed one that was actually from the webinar and Q&A. This was from Eric asking if we can assign keyword tags to qualitative analysis to analyze trends automatically. For example, he was saying, we noticed the word confusing being mentioned often. Can we flag that word so the data is analyzed for us? Eric, I don't know if you're asking specifically about Aurelius. We don't do that automatically, but I can show you a way in which you can very quickly find that and then add a tag to all those things really quickly in bulk on your project. So if you're here, stick around. We can certainly walk through that at the end when we walk through Aurelius.
And then Meg asked, with the page with the logos with the partner apps, those are all linked. So when I send out the slides at the end, you can just click on the logo and it'll take you to their site. Not all those apps are partners with us, but they're cool. They're cool things. I'll also link to some extra tools. Let's see, Zach, are there any that catch your eye?
Well, I see one, excuse me, that's kind of just recently added. This is from Sarah. Can you share a tip for combining web analytics with tagged insights that you just described? I assume that was for me, Sarah. This is a really good one, and I actually get asked this pretty often. So particularly as it comes to Aurelius, just full disclosure, we are qualitative research focused, right? But we do get people asking, how do you get analytics into that stuff? And so my answer is typically, you're drawing insights from analytics. So for instance, the raw data may or may not back up that key insight, but most often what we see people doing is using analytics to point them in a direction that makes sense based on if something in their product or their website or whatever the case may be. So combining that, I would actually use certain data points or even summarized parts of that data in a key insight to say, hey, look, this is the thing that we learned with the description and tags, right? Here's the raw data that backs that up. That can be both actual notes from usability tests, interviews, field study, whatever, and it can be actual data points from analytics. So oftentimes I'll recommend doing that, but I don't know if that completely answers your question. If you're still around, Sarah, please do let me know. That's the best answer I've got for you with the context that I have.
All right, cool. So we got another write-in question from Coriano, who slacked me in the UX Mastery Slack yesterday with 3 questions. One of his questions was, how do you combat biases and leading in your user interviews? This is a really good question, and it takes a lot of time and skill to, kind of fully hone that. In terms of in the actual interview, we try to say to always ask, tell me about a time when, or when was the last time you did X, to encourage users to talk about an actual story or an actual event that happened instead of, thinking about speculating or thinking about what the right answer is. And then I also got some tips from our team here who say, Brittany, who's our participant marketer, had a really good tip for when you're creating screener surveys. Make sure to include a none of the above option so that people don't feel like there's a right answer or they don't feel pressured to pick one if none of them apply.
I saw another one come through. There's some really good questions, like really tough questions coming through live here. So it's testing my mettle. But so we got one from Emily, and she asked, do you have any tips or advice for someone just getting started with coding/tagging? She said, I find my tags tend to be very objective and shallow, limited to things like feature or product area, which helps organize, but doesn't really allow for deep insights to emerge. I do have some good tips for this. Please understand that this is its own webinar, but some very quick hit useful tips I can give you is think about your research goals that you probably should be setting up before any research project, right? The questions that you have asked. Start to break those questions down. Start to break those research goals down into descriptors. 1 or 2 word descriptors. Those start to become your initial tags, okay? Because you know that you have to answer that question to have a successful research project and be able to share something out. So that would be the first place I would recommend is to say, think about the research goals, the research questions you have, break them down into descriptors, just like you would tag anything else. Start with that. The other really important and useful tip here is that you don't have to be married to those. Those don't have to be the only tags that you use. As you continue to go through your analysis later, add more tags to notes and observations as they make sense. As you're reading it, you say, well, this is actually about taking notes, or this is about sign-up error, or whatever the case may be. Be as liberal or as stringent as you like, but don't restrict yourself unnecessarily.
Let's see. We have, oh my gosh, there's so many questions. We have another question from Carolyn. Any suggestions for initially setting up a research program? And that's a really good question. Setting up a research program is like incredibly difficult to do. I think one of the top tips that I have is to make sure that you have everything in place. You have a system, you know how you want to do it. Because having those kinds of boundaries in place when you start to bring other people in, and then when you start to compile lots and lots of data, lots and lots of research, that stuff can like snowball out of control really, really quickly. So it's important to have a good idea of what you want to do. And I think Aaron was going to send you a couple of articles that we have that help you lay some stuff out so that you're set up for success once you get far into it. Zach, do you have any other tips on that one?
For getting a research program up and running, honestly,
Yeah.
it's like any habit, you just start doing it. So, and just like any habit, it's probably not going to be sophisticated, well-refined in a well-oiled machine at the beginning, but through blunt force trauma or sheer will, you start doing it, you start getting in other people's hands, and they start seeing value from it. And if you're doing that well, even in the smallest way, you start to snowball, and more people are going to say, we want answers to questions that we want to feel confident in before making decisions about our business, our products and services. Now, that's the only other thing I would add to it. There's a lot to unpack there, and again, probably its own webinar. But yeah, I think I'll use it.
Yeah, maybe that's the next one we'll run. So let's see. There's a really good question from Frost, which was, Frost, which popped up in the chat. Research can often be a mix of sales and marketing feedback and actual product feedback. And so you might be hearing customer feedback from a factory owner, but get completely different feedback from a factory worker. There are major differences in context, education, primary language. How do you effectively separate these? And how can you channel the key insights and findings to the appropriate audience? This could also be its own webinar. Definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So the questions I hear really are, how do you effectively separate these? How can you channel them to the appropriate internal audience? I'll answer the last question more directly and just simply say, if you're organizing your projects and the data within it, in a way that makes sense to actually separate and share those well, it should make that easier. I can't answer it specific to you because I don't know the appropriate internal audiences and how some of those things work. So happy to chat with you offline about that stuff if you want to email me and get into some more specifics. But if you're organizing it in the way that makes sense for you to be able to do that easier later, it should smooth that process a bit. Now, the other one was, how do you effectively separate these? In a lot of cases, honestly, I don't know that you should, because just with anything else, a mix of data can actually lead to an insight, right? So that can be direct conversation with customers. It could be things you heard second and third hand from sales and support, whatever the case may be. I often actually like to combine many of those things, but here's what I can say. Again, the organization of the project itself and how you do or do not use tags can actually help you separate the source, right? And if you're using something like user interviews, you know where your folks are coming from. So you can kind of trace some of that back. I don't know if that's your question, but my two-part answer is, A, I don't know that I would worry about that so much when creating the insight, because all supporting data is often relevant. But then, part B to that answer is, again, a combination of organizing it as you go and choosing to stick with that consistently will allow you to separate sort of the source or where you're getting that from.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see what else we got. Answered that. And then we have a question from Stephanie that says, hi, I'm transitioning into UX research. Do you have any advice on how to get into that field? I don't know. I would say, it depends on where you're coming from, I guess.
I've actually, it's odd. I've been asked this question pretty frequently lately, which is encouraging because that means there's a lot more of us coming into the field or a lot more people getting interested in it. but it often comes from people who are like not already in the field or have that background. One of the things I recommend is find something that you're really passionate about. So if it's a nonprofit, if it's a local organization, whatever the case may be, and try to get in touch with them and just simply say, I would love to help you out for free. And go and learn something for them to help answer questions for them that would actually make their jobs better or enrich their organization. It gives you practical experience. It's basically a win-win for everybody. They get work for free. You get practice and experience that you can actually use to talk to other companies about your research process and the work that you've done, and hopefully results that you gave to this awesome nonprofit or local organization, which also looks great because you're doing some charity work, right? I know the idea of working for free is not always palatable, but it is a really good way to get your feet wet and get some really practical hands-on experience where you can show and demonstrate that you're able to do the work.
Yeah. And I guess words of encouragement. We've been doing a podcast for the last, I guess it's almost been a year now. And Zach has a podcast as well. And so we've talked to like a lot of really cool people within UX, and they have a huge range of backgrounds. We've talked to Susan at Toast, who is who came from like restaurants and then started working at Toast, which is a restaurant POS system. And she runs, I think, user research and design there, which is really, really cool. But there's a lot of different ways that people have gotten into it. So it's not, I don't think it's a prohibitive field. Yeah,
for sure. Lots of people are willing to help. Lots of people are willing to give advice, even for free, similar to what we're doing here. But even just one-off, I would say, find somebody who is local to you that you admire, who you know is good, and just offer to buy them a beer or a coffee, and just say, I'd love to pick your brain and understand how I can get in and what skills and approach I should take.
All right, cool. I think that's all of the questions, most of the questions.
There was a lot more around tagging, but I would just say, in the interest of time, and I know everybody's got to get back to work, or maybe you're getting to lunch, or in some cases, other side of the world, you folks you're getting ready to go and have your evening. So I would say, please feel free to email me directly. I'm super accessible, or come to our site and use the chat. Chances are you'll be getting me and talk to me. I'm happy to answer any of this stuff if you want to reach out after the fact.
Yeah, same, absolutely. Both of our emails are at the beginning. You can email either of us at any time with any questions. And I think now we're going to show you how each of our platforms, you can implement these tips on each of our platforms. I will go first, do user interviews. There we go. When I send out the slides at the end, you will get a link. You can launch your first project with 3 free participants. Just click that link. You got it. Or you can schedule a demo with our research consultants if you'd like to learn more about user interviews. I'm going to do a really quick overview of what it looks like, just so that you can see. But I'm not going to go super deep. Okay. So let's see. Ooh. There we go. All right, so this is what our platform looks like. When you come into the workspace, after you created a project, this is what you'll see. You'll see all of your participants, whether or not you've confirmed them, approved them, or they're marked qualified, which means that they met all of the requirements of your screener survey. If you would like to create a habitual research practice, you can create a project and leave it open. I'm not actually going to walk through the process of creating a project because we're a little bit crunched on time, but it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. You just walk through, you just create your project, set it up, set up your screener survey and the characteristics you're looking for, and then we'll go out and find your participants and bring them back to you, marked qualified or unqualified. Then you can confirm them. Your schedule with any of your confirmed sessions lives right here. So you can open up new slots, and it automatically syncs with your Google Calendar. So my calendar is pretty clear right now, but you can add them and those will automatically sync to your Google Calendar and it will tell you when they've been filled or not. And you can message your participants from within the app here. And then once they've participated, you can mark them completed or did not show. They didn't show, then we won't distribute the incentive to them and we won't charge you. But if they've completed, we'll distribute the incentive. And then we have a $30 recruitment fee for consumers, which is, you know, if you want moms in their 40s, $30. If you want moms in their 30s, in their 40s who are developers, then it's $70. Occupation targeting is a little bit harder. It takes a little more time on our end. And then if you have your project set up, you have a panel, you're managing that panel with user interviews, you will go to Research Hub, which looks like this. This is where all of your participants live. It keeps track of all of their information, all of their first name, last name, email, all that stuff. And then we can also see last invited and last applied. So you can sort your participants. You can go ahead and filter them and say, let's see, last invited date is more than 60 days ago. So I can invite any of these people to a new study, and they probably won't have participated to, you know, recently, or and they won't be mad at me for inviting them to a study again. And you can also add any fields that you'd like. We have some automatic fields, and then since this is our research hub, we also have some custom fields. But you can go in and update any fields at any time, and you can also add new ones. And you can also upload a CSV if you'd like to, with your existing customer list or a list that you grabbed from any of those panel resources that I went through in our tip. So this all has the participants, and then it'll upload and it'll email me when it's done, and I can come and I can invite them to a study. So if I want to invite all of these to a project, I can go ahead and do that, select whichever project I'd like, and then invite them. And I'll go through our pricing really quick, and then I'll be done. Like I said, if you want to pay as you go, you have a $30 recruitment fee from us, or a $70 recruitment fee if it's a professional. We also have add-ons like Screener, Skip Logic, and Advanced Screening. And then if you want to do Research Hub Unlimited, which is panel management. So if you have a customer list that you want to recruit from, and then you also want to save any of those people that you recruit through us, we offer unlimited recruiting from both our consumer panel and your own users. So that $30 fee, don't worry about it. And that has unlimited saved contacts, advanced screening, and skip logic. 2 researcher seats, which is edit powers, and then unlimited collaborator seats, which is view powers. And if you'd like to know more about any of this, you can email me or you can schedule a demo with our research consultants. And I'll let Zach walk through Aurelius.
All right, cool. Let me just share my screen here, and then we will get started. So let me know if you can see that.
Yes, you're good.
All right, so this is Aurelius. When you first sign into it, what you're seeing here is a list of all your projects. Now again, talking about organizing your data as you go, organize it by project. A lot of times what we see is people organizing their projects by the research project or effort itself. So something like, you know, user interviews for new feature updates, whatever the case may be. When you get into that, you're going to see an overview of your project here with all of the interviews we did in this case, note categories, and we'll talk about what those are. It's part of that organization scheme. When you first start your project, you'll go to the Notes tab and actually start collecting your data in Aurelius. So now that you have your project named and organized, you can actually start to organize the notes within it with note categories. Think of a note category just like a new document that you might make. when you start a new interview, right? So you start a new interview with a next participant, you create a new sheet or Google Doc, whatever it might be, to start taking your notes. And so you would do that in Aurelius here. We'll just call this User Interview 7 with JB. Once you've got that, you can start getting your notes into Aurelius. The best part of this is that if you have your entire team in here, or even just the way we're doing it now, if, let's say Carrie was doing the interview and I was taking notes, we can actually both be in here taking notes together during the interview in real time. And as we talked about tags and tagging your data as you go, we do that in Aurelius too, but we could be tagging this, let's just say, as interview 5. And this is personally how I use Aurelius. I actually use it as my note-taking tool to be getting stuff in here, organized and tagged. Already it's speeding up that process for me. I do want to show you one of our most popular features. So all I'm doing is copying and pasting data from somewhere else. So this was another Word document. Let's say you took notes somewhere else or you want to get past research into Aurelius. All you have to do is copy and paste that into the notes area. And we'll tag this also as interview 5. But this time when I click Save Note, it's asking if I want one big note or 24 separate notes. This is our bulk input feature. It is easily one of our most popular because what it's going to do is create 24 separate notes for us and then tag each individual one with interview 5 because that's the tag that we had. And so you can very quickly get some of your research data in from user interviews, usability testing, whatever it might be, really quick and easy. Because there was a lot of question about tags and how you auto tag some stuff, we don't have auto tagging in Aurelius, but we do have bulk tagging. And I'll show you one of the ways in which we see people do that. With our keyword search here in the project, you can actually search all of your notes across all of your interviews in this project. So if we remembered, people were talking a lot about teams, we just search for team. You notice it's actually filtering everything out except those notes that have the keyword team. And I can very quickly select those and then add that tag in bulk. So it's not doing it automatically, but we can add the tag very quickly to multiple notes at one time so we can create that theme or group that we want to take a look at for our analysis later. And on that note, because there was a lot more questions about tags and things like that, when you want to go and do your analysis, you can take a look at the tags page in your project. And here we're actually breaking down all the tags you're using on this particular project in Aurelius. So you can very quickly see everything you have tagged as interview 5, for instance. And just click on that, and you've got all your data right here. You can select multiple tags in here to do your analysis and be more fine-grained. So we can say, we want to see everything tagged as interview 5 and teams because we were talking about that. Now the best part of this is it's showing us right now results that have any of our selected tags. But you notice if I change this to, hey, say it must include all, it'll get us down to these 5 specific notes. So really speeding up your analysis. Again, if you're conducting your research, tagging and organizing as you go, you can come in here and very quickly get to a very specific set of themes or groups to actually spend more time on. Now, of course, one of the tips that we shared in the webinar today is creating key insights to share this stuff. So there's more than one way to do this in Aurelius, but even from right here on our tags page in the project, let's say these 5 notes represented a new insight for us. I can create that right from here by selecting them and clicking New Insight, where we can say key insights are the best way to share research. And we can, again, add that description as we described to give it more detail if we so choose. Now when I click OK, Aurelius creates the insight for us, but just as importantly, takes those 5 notes we had selected and attaches them to that key insight as supporting evidence. So just as we talked about now, we're building this library of key insights with the name, description, add tags to it. So we'll actually call this creating reports just as an example. And then all of the particular notes and data that we want to attach to the key insight. And so now they're all listed here and it's going to be findable by any keyword in the name or the tag itself. Now, as you talk about sort of scaling the operations of some of this research work and actually getting it into the hands of other people, there's a couple of different ways in which you can search across this if you've been organizing your research in this way. So I'll just very quickly show you our all tags page. And right here, you can actually see every single tag you're using across every single project in Aurelius. So very quickly, if somebody says, hey, what do we know about creating reports? We can search for report in our tags. And we can see we have 3 tags that include the word report. We can select all of them, and now we're actually viewing key insights and even raw notes across all of our projects right here in one spot to see exactly what we learned about these particular tags. We can even come in here and merge these two tags if they made sense. So there was a question after the webinar, how do you manage the number of tags, them getting out of control and things like that? Well, right here in our all tags page, you can actually merge these. And if we gave it a new name, it would change it in every project in the Aurelius to start to groom and keep that under order for you. So the other thing I want to show you too is you can find this stuff in our universal search. So again, if it's all organized in the way that you should have been doing, if you're following our tips, you can come in here very quickly when someone 6 months from now says, hey, what do we know about creating reports? We can just search for report, and we see we've got 205 notes, 37 insights in a document that have that keyword. And we can get even more specific and say, we want it to also have the tag creating reports, which will narrow it down a bit for us. You can see all of our insights right here. Now, that's the way in which you research, organize, and manage all your research data in Aurelius. Of course, everything starts in a project, create key insights, and they become very flexible in this, what's often referred to as user research repository, to manage and share all this stuff. So in terms of sharing it, I want to show you one of our most popular and powerful features in collections. So a collection, in its most basic form, is a custom group of research, right? And this could be from any and all research projects you've got. So let's say somebody came and said, what do we know about creating reports? So we can say, we'll call this one creating reports, insights and findings. Give it a description or executive summary, depending on who you're sharing it with, and say, here is all our research about how people make and share reports. And I save that. My collection is now ready for me to start putting research data into. And there's a couple things that we can do here. We can add key insights from multiple projects right here that help us answer that question. Or create a collection to make a research report, or gather everything we know about a persona or a product. It's literally intentionally flexible to accommodate anything you need. And a couple ways we can get it in here is even right from our search. If we just go, what do we know about report? Super easy. Basically like Google for your research. And we can say that one helps us answer what do we know about creating reports. We click into it. It takes us to that project, that key insight details, where we can quickly add it to our collection. Of course, if you know that you have key insights from other projects, like we did, that match and belong in that collection, you can go right to the project and the key insights. There's the one that we made together. I can choose that and add that to a collection as well. And so now if I go back to our collection, of course, it is showing all the key insights that we've added, even from multiple projects. Now, the other thing that you can do with collections, and this is really important with tags and why you should be organizing and tagging your data as you go, is you can add tags to a collection. So for this one, it probably makes sense to add the tag creating reports and maybe even reporting, okay? So yes, of course, this is going to tag the collection so you can find the collection by that tag. But the real power of tagging the collection is that now what we've done is brought in everything we know. And everything we've tagged is creating reports from literally every project right here into Aurelius. That includes our key insights, raw notes, and even documents that we have tagged as creating reports. This is all in one spot, and it stays up to date with any new things that you tag as creating reports in new research projects. Why is that relevant? Because then, of course, you can actually share this collection with anybody. All you've got to do is add their email. It will send them a link to a read-only version of this collection that stays up to date with any additions or changes you make, and they don't even need an account with Aurelius. They don't even need to be part of your team. You can share this with your stakeholder or your product owner and give them the answers to what do we know about creating reports. That's Aurelius at a high level. We do offer a 30-day trial, so I invite you to come check it out. I'd love to hear from you and see if it helps meet your needs. And if you have any other questions, I'm always available.
Perfect. Awesome. I think we had one question from Sarah who said, how did you split up that massive note you pasted into 24 notes?
Yeah, good question. So that was that was one of our most popular features. It's called our bulk input. So all it does is you take a Word document, or even you can copy and paste an entire column from Excel, for instance. You paste it into the note area of Aurelius, and it will create a new note based on every line break or carriage return automatically for you. So you can actually go in there and format it to break the notes in the way that you like. Then you can add a tag, and it'll add a tag to every single one if you so choose. Just click save, and it turns into all the notes for you.
All right, perfect. He says thanks. Yeah. All right, I think that's it. We're right on the buzzer. All
Pretty
right.
close, yeah. Right
Pretty
on the nose.
good.
Look at that. Look at that.
If you have any questions about user interviews or Aurelius, both of our emails and our websites are at the front of the slide deck, which will be emailed out to you either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. We'll see what happens.
You will get it no matter what.
You will get an email. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. And hopefully we'll see you all at our next webinars.
Hope so. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to chatting with you more soon.
Bye, guys.
See ya.